Welcome to another episode of the Jameson Files. I'm Carrie Weber, and I'll be your host today. And I'm so excited to have as our guest today one of Jameson's founders, Dr. John Jameson, who is also the inspiration of the title of our podcast, the Jameson Files, a nod to a column that you used to provide regularly
every month
for a very well-known dental publication. And so we thought it was an appropriate name for this podcast as we come into the newest way of gathering information and helping to teach and helping dentists and teams learn productive and profitable ways to improve their practices.
I love the way the name continues on.
Well, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for being with me. Probably not a little known fact, but another fact is that you're not only the founder of this company, but you're my dad. That's my favorite thing about you. But for the sake of this podcast, we're going to keep it very professional.
Yes.
And I want to pick your brain a little bit for those listening and watching. And today I'd really like to talk not necessarily about your origin story as a dentist, but your evolution story, so to speak. From my perspective, here's how I know the story goes, and I'd love to hear your perspective of it. You graduated dental school, moved back to your hometown to practice dentistry.
Right.
Purchased an existing practice there in a small town in southern Oklahoma.
Right.
Practiced probably the way that that practice had always run previously, and the only way you knew how at the time, for about 10 years, and found yourself burning out, financially stressed, and realized something's got to change. So can you tell me a little bit about, that was about year 10, is that right?
That's right.
Can you share with us a little bit about, what was the final straw? What caused you to make a decision of, I've got to turn the tables here. I have to change what's happening here, and how you went from where you were to where you ended up, which was one of the premier comprehensive and restorative dentists, in my opinion, in the country. I know I may be biased, but I do believe that to be true because you were an influencer and a knowledge sharer across the country and beyond for many years. So how did you go from the struggle to the success and fulfillment that you found in your practicing life after that?
Well, going back to the origin, I had a great partner when I started. And then we split that partnership, and that was when I took the practice that I had then for my career. And I was able then to focus on what my goals were. But now you say at year 10. Wow. It was stressful. Financially, Kathy and I were not seeing the results that we wanted to. I was very frustrated by my patients trying to dictate exactly the kind of dentistry that I would do for them. And I knew I needed to do better than that. They were accepting, they were wanting to receive the kind of dentistry that I thought was probably second level. And I was trying to encourage them on to move forward with better dentistry. And if I look at the things that really helped make that transition, was my clinical development was the first thing. In that, Pete Dawson was my mentor, and he taught me how to handle difficult cases. And I then learned how to clinically take care of those particular needs. And probably the biggest thing that helped me to be able to get to do that kind of dentistry was that I was about the 17th or 18th doctor in the United States that was involved with healthcare financing.
Right.
And so what people were waiting for their ship to come in now had an opportunity to receive the care that they needed and wanted that we could do for them and be able to financially be comfortable with it.
Well, and talking about your time at Dawson and how integral that was for your development and growth, not only as a practitioner but as the owner of that business. I was just talking with a doctor recently that was considering maybe they needed to go on for more clinical education, and the group of us that were there said, the moment that and they were talking about the same thing, that they know they could be doing more comprehensive dentistry, but they're not really sure how at this point. We said, the moment that you start taking those kind of courses, your eyes are opened to what's going on in that patient's mouth in a way that you can't ever go back, because you're seeing it from a completely different set of eyes. That what was happening for you?
That's right. So that is it. That mouth is totally differently viewed once you know what to do with it than when you really aren't sure, or you have reservations internally about from yourself about providing that kind of dentistry. And so that was what it did for me. It totally opened my eyes to a whole new way. If I were doing a course on a weekend, and Monday, when I went back into my office, everybody was different.
Yeah.
Everybody was different.
Yeah.
And so then when I had healthcare financing to be able to back that treatment up, then it was really different. And so I had to sit down many times and replan cases and represent them with the key link. We know now to be able to do this. And that was my inroad, to be able to let my patient family see how I was developing. And they got to be a witness to that.
Can you repeat that? So what you're saying is, you went back, let's say is your 10th year, you've already been taking care of a lot of these patients. You had a patient family.
Right.
So they've been accustomed to a certain type of care.
Right.
Now there's all these new opportunities. So can you tell me again what your verbal skills were to enter into new conversations with existing patients about more comprehensive care?
I would be able to just raise their chair up, and I could sit beside the chair, and I could say, I have recently had a great course to train me to be able to offer you treatment opportunities here in our practice that I couldn't do before. We now know, boom, whatever that would be for that particular person, and be able then to revamp their treatment plans. To give you an idea, when it really hit home was when I began to use intraoral cameras and extraoral digital photography.
Right.
So I would schedule these people back for a complimentary photography session where I would capture those images, the necessary images that I wanted, and I had a whole sequence that I caught, and I was able then to store them and repeat and review with the patient what we were keeping as a record, to talk about new opportunities for them. You've got to realize, I was doing this before there was digital storage.
Right.
So I was storing these on analog discs, and I had a disc with every patient's name on it, and I could go back, and then I had room on that disc to store the afters. So befores and afters on all the patients on analog discs.
Some people are like, what's a disc? I'm just kidding.
Well, no, seriously. They were little bitty things.
I'm just kidding. So thinking about, obviously you were having these game-changer, life-changing experiences in your continuing education and training and learning. And you did recast the vision of what you wanted for your ideal practice, and what kind of treatment you wanted to be providing. How did your team play a role in that shift?
When I realized that I wanted to make these changes, I rewrote my goals.
Okay.
And I presented them to my team. And I will tell you, it was an emotional situation. As I looked up from having read them, I had them on a piece of paper. I looked up, I had crying women. And they realized then that we were moving in another direction. Okay? And then they were so willing to accept that challenge. Now, some didn't.
I was going to say, was everybody on board? Was everybody crying because they were excited? Or were some crying because they were not excited?
No, I think the tears of excitement, those that weren't excited didn't stay long.
Yeah.
They didn't want to learn how to turn on a computer.
Yeah.
And so, there was just a total evolutionary process right then.
Yeah.
And that didn't take but a few months to be able to have all that happen. And then we began storing images and presenting cases and inviting people back for new diagnostic workups and new consultations where they could visually see that. And all of that came from Kathy's work in education and learning about what percentages people are able to accept with visual tools as well as auditory tools, and how you combine the two of them.
Yes.
And with good verbal skills and when you make your presentations.
Earlier you said when you were in the early years of practice, your practice was being dictated, to the lack of a better term, by the patient's desire for less than optimal care.
Right.
Desire is probably a strong word, but from their perspective and
Yeah.
understanding, that's what they were accustomed to. That's
Right.
what they thought was best for them. They didn't know any different.
Right.
So here you come with all of this new training, this new perspective, bringing them back in, using visual aids and photography, and having these very unique conversations that more than likely they've never experienced before. Can you recall what some of those initial responses and reactions from the patients were for this dramatic difference?
Well, the thing you have to recognize, and I want all the clinicians out there to understand this, you are not the dentist for everyone.
Yes.
You're not the dentist for everyone. And so I had some people who did not willingly buy into this. They were not wanting that kind of dentistry. So when you think about when people say to me, gosh, I need to have 30 new patients a month. And I'm thinking about, with my system, what the heck would I do with 30 new patients a month? I didn't have any place to put them,
Yeah.
Particularly on a schedule. And so it's just totally it's a shift in what your expectations are for your practice. And so with 10 to 15 new patients a month, I could produce to my goals what I wanted to do. And with appropriate scheduling, a block scheduling the way Jameson trains, you can then be able to have your daily production goals met by lunch.
Right.
And that was as I evolved in my practice, that's what I looked for.
I would guess that you probably lost some patients.
I did.
But
And many of them came back.
right.
Seriously, yeah.
You probably lost them, but
Yeah.
you were but the new patients, just like you're saying, the new patients that were coming in were patients that were looking for this type of care.
That's
You
right.
certainly started to create a reputation for yourself in the community
Right.
surrounding area.
Right.
I remember you telling me once that people would say about you to others, if you want cheap, don't go to Dr. John.
That's right.
But if you want really good care,
Yeah.
then that's where you go.
And you make that decision.
You draw that line in the sand.
In the sand. That's right.
I think this, while for you, this obviously happened, 30
years ago.
years ago.
Getting ready to have my 45th reunion from dental school.
So, but the interesting thing to me is this conversation is still so relevant for so many people that are probably listening or watching, because and I have these conversations with doctors on the regular that they are either trying to figure out a new way for themselves. They find themselves locked in to a certain type of care, or that patient mindset, the insurance-driven mindset now is what is the struggle. And how do we shift? And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of you're not going to be the answer for everyone, but you better get clear on who you are.
Work on that.
And then get comfortable with being uncomfortable for a little bit.
Right.
But be confident, and once you get clear on the kind of dentistry you do want to provide and the kind of patients that would be the best fit for you,
right,
things can and will change.
And that you're in control. You doctors are in control of your own destiny and what you want out of your profession. If you aren't getting out of your profession what you want now, then you have to change. You can't keep going. What is the definition of insanity? Doing things the same way and expecting a different result?
Yes.
Well, that isn't going to work,
right.
In your practicing life. So you've got to internally change. And you'll know it. You're either feeling disgruntled or, I know I could lay in bed at night. My heart was beating so hard that the bed would shake.
Wow.
And that's called high blood pressure.
Right.
And that wasn't a healthy situation. And so a lot of it was created by frustration. And so I think that as people look at making the changes they have to make in their own lives and in their professional lives to be able to accomplish the goals that they want to have and have a team surrounding them that buys into those goals. My entire practicing career, I only had 5 clinical assistants.
Right.
And when I retired, I had 3 of them still on my team. So, people had to move, and people had to change because of family obligations. But other than that, it was the same crew.
Because they believed in what you were doing together.
Exactly.
You had created this healthy workspace, not only for your patients, but for your team.
And for those of you that work with Drew, I'm the only doctor she ever worked with.
Yeah.
She came right out of dental hygiene school.
Yeah. Drew Halverson is our most senior Jameson advisor who does business.
That doesn't mean she's
hygiene.
old.
No. No, Drew, I'm sorry. I don't mean it that way. But we always like to say Jameson at this point has been incorporated for 29 years, and Drew's been an advisor for Jameson for 30. So there is that.
Pretty much that.
So for everyone that's listening, that might see themselves practicing in a way or seeing their practice functioning in a way that's not ideal to them, and they do recognize that.
Right.
But they don't know how to make the change. What we teach at Jameson, so much of it is founded in what you implemented and applied in your practice, you and Kathy. And so there's value in all of it. But for you as the dentist, as the leader, as the owner, is there one or are there 1 or 2 specific systems or areas or processes or something that you never compromised on, that you started implementing and you intentionally made that a priority for the rest of your career, that was a difference maker, that you think, if you're not going to do anything else,
right,
do this? Can you think of 1 or 2 that
let's just think about a couple of them to begin with.
Okay.
And then as we do these more, I can go into more depth in other areas, but just to begin with.
Yes.
Let's say probably one of the most important things is being able to develop a video dental system in your practice where you're able to capture photographs and show people existing conditions, then be able to have befores and afters of those cases, then to be able to motivate and educate other patients from the successes you've had with previous patients in your practice. That, I think, is one of the first things, and you've got to work at it, and you've got to train. In other words, you have time over a lunch period where you bring lunch in, and you guys have lunch together, then you brush up, and then you practice on one another.
Right.
Before you embarrass yourself in front of your patient family. But make sure you know how to capture those images.
Better to embarrass yourself amongst your teammates and friends first.
That's right. That's right. And get the system down.
Right.
Then I think probably the second system to really look at is, okay, so now you're able to talk about treatment opportunities. How do people feel comfortable then about being able to afford that? And that you're not giving this away. So then getting involved deeply with your healthcare financing program and being able to train on that and know exactly what to say and have the entire team buy into that.
Yes.
That's a huge issue.
I think, most of you, more than likely, have intraoral cameras and digital cameras. So the question is, are you maximizing those tools? And I think what Dr. John is also saying is, it's not only just taking photography of that patient, but creating an archive of befores and afters, so that in your case presentations and patient education of diagnosed treatment, you can show them cases similar to theirs and what you were able to accomplish with the kind of care that you're recommending for them. It's just such a powerful learning tool and motivational tool to show them what's possible, the visual aids.
And every patient signed off on a form that said that we could use their photographs for educational and publication purposes.
Yes.
Be sure that you have
Get
that
permission.
done. Get permission.
Get
That's
permission.
exactly right.
Written.
Yeah, written permission.
Documentation.
And then learn during your consultations how to do permission statements. And
Yeah.
so these are all of it blends together
does.
with time.
It does.
And you all of you as clients have the materials to take that. You get into great communication equals great production, chapter 10. You can learn about how to present. All the verbiage and the scripting is there, and don't be alienated by the term scripting. Scripting is powerful because the patient has never heard it before, even if you use it the same way every time.
Well, and I think it's important to create something that, ideally, what would you want to say so that you can practice that, so that in time it becomes so second nature to you that it's not like you're scripted.
Right.
It's really part
of you.
It's part of your vocabulary.
We'll tell you
but
what.
practice makes perfect, and if you
Yes.
don't have a tool to practice with, it's very
Yeah.
difficult to perfect and master those verbal
That's
skills that we
right.
know are so important.
And they become part of you. In other words, I can give you verbiage right now that I used in my practice, and I haven't seen patients in 12 years. Now, I've retired because of a car wreck,
Yeah.
and they made me quit.
Yeah.
But all of it became such a part of me that you would all be the same way. You just keep working on it.
Exactly. But we could keep going and going, and so we are going to do some more. So stay tuned for more episodes with Dr. John. This was so great, and I feel like we're just getting rolling. We're just getting started.
That's right.
So lots more to talk about in upcoming episodes. But thanks for joining us, and thank you for being with us. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Jameson Files. Visit us online at jmsn.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify. See you next time.